My daughter's phone number has been disconnected for 20 years. I know because I called it every year on her birthday. Every September 14th. For 20 years. I dial the number and listen to the automated message. The number you have reached is no longer in service. And then I'd hang up and sit in the dark and pretend that the next year she might answer. She never answered. Because my daughter, Grace, died on March 6, 2005. She was 19. A car accident on Highway 158 outside Elizabeth City, North Carolina. A pickup truck ran a red light at the intersection of Halstead Boulevard. The impact was on the driver's side. Grace was pronounced dead at Centara Albemarle Medical Center at 40:47 p.m. I buried her on March 10th. I kept her phone number memorized the way some people keep prayers memorized. Not because it connects to anything, but because the act of remembering is the last form of contact. Then, on February 11, 2025, my phone rang, 9:14 p.m. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in 2 decades. Grace's number. The number that had been disconnected since 2005. The number that the automated system had told me 20 times was no longer in service. I answered, a woman's voice. Not Grace's voice, older, harder. The voice of someone who has been living inside a secret for a long time. Mr. Holloway. My name is Rebecca Voss. I've had your daughter's phone number for 15 years, and I've had something else of hers that you need to know about. I'm calling because I can't carry it anymore. What Rebecca told me in the next 40 minutes unraveled everything I thought I knew about the night my daughter died. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. If that phone call already sent a chill through you, take a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It truly helps this channel reach more people. And a gentle reminder, while this story carries real emotions and real lessons, some names, details, and events have been fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. Stay with me, because what Rebecca found in that phone number was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled 20 years of lies. My name is Arthur Holloway. I'm 64 years old. I live in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, a small city in the northeastern corner of the state, on the Pasquotank River, where the land is flat and the sky is wide, and the kind of secrets that small towns keep are buried so deep that it takes 2 decades and a stranger's phone call to dig them up. I need to tell you about Grace. Grace Elaine Holloway, born September 14, 1985. Her mother, Denise, and I divorced in 1996 when Grace was 11. Denise moved to Virginia Beach. Grace stayed with me in Elizabeth City, her choice. Made at 11 years old with the clarity that children sometimes have when they see which parent is the ground and which parent is the weather. I'm a mechanic. 40 years at the same shop, Holloway's Garage on Ringhouse Street, a 2-bay operation that I inherited from my father and that I've run since 1988. I fix cars, trucks, boats. This is coastal Carolina, and every third vehicle tows something that floats. I earn $62,000 a year. I live simply. I am not a complicated man. Grace was complicated. Beautifully complicated. She was the kind of child who asked questions that adults couldn't answer. Why do birds fly south if they don't know where south is? At age 6. If God made everything, who made the idea of making things? At age 9. She was smart in the way that terrifies small-town parents. The kind of smart that was always going to take her somewhere else. She was studying criminal justice at Elizabeth City State University, an HBCU, a historically black college and university. One of the 100 institutions designated by the Department of Education under Title III of the Higher Education Act. ECSU has a strong criminal justice program, and Grace had chosen it because she wanted to be an investigator. FBI, specifically. She'd told me at 16 that she wanted to work for the Bureau, and she'd never wavered. She was 19, a sophomore, 3.7 GPA, and 11 credits away from declaring her major when she died. The accident report, filed by the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, Troop A, District 1, described a straightforward collision. At approximately 40:15 p.m. on March 6, 2005, a 2001 Ford F-150 traveling eastbound on Highway 158 ran a red light at the intersection of Halstead Boulevard Extended. The truck struck Grace's vehicle, a 1998 Honda Civic, on the driver's side at an estimated speed of 52 miles per hour. Grace was killed on impact. The truck driver, a man named Dale Sutter, 44, suffered minor injuries. Dale Sutter, A name I've carried for 20 years the way a soldier carries shrapnel embedded, permanent, painful in weather changes. Dale Sutter was a commercial fisherman from Nag's Head, 45 minutes east of Elizabeth City, on the Outer Banks. He told the highway patrol that he'd been distracted changing the radio station and didn't see the red light. He was charged with misdemeanor death by motor vehicle under NCGS 20-141-4, a charge that carries a maximum of 150 days in jail. He served 60 days. 60 days for killing my daughter. 2 months in the Dare County Detention Center, followed by 18 months of supervised probation. The sentence was standard for a misdemeanor traffic fatality in North Carolina in 2005. A state where the legal distinction between misdemeanor death by vehicle and felony death by vehicle depends on whether the driver was impaired or committing another traffic violation at the time of the accident. Dale Sutter was not impaired. His blood alcohol was 0%. His toxicology was clean. He was, according to the legal system, a sober man who ran a red light because he was changing the radio station. A tragic accident. A preventable death. A 60-day sentence that equated to approximately 17 hours of incarceration per year of Grace's life. I accepted it. Not because it wasn't, but because the legal system said it was an accident and I had no evidence to suggest otherwise. The highway patrol investigated. The district attorney prosecuted. The judge sentenced. The system processed my daughter's death with the mechanical efficiency of a machine that handles too many cases and cares about too few. For 20 years, I believed it was an accident. Rebecca Voss proved it wasn't. Rebecca was 38. A nurse practitioner at Centaura Albemarle, the same hospital where Grace was pronounced dead. She'd been assigned Grace's old phone number in 2010, when the carrier, Verizon Wireless, which had acquired the original carrier GTE MobileNet through a series of mergers in the early 2000s, recycled the number and reassigned it. Phone number reassignment is standard practice in the telecommunications industry. The Federal Communications Commission allows carriers to reassign disconnected numbers after a waiting period, typically 90 days to 1 year, depending on the carrier's policy and the area code's number availability. Grace's number was disconnected in 2005 after I stopped paying the bill. It sat in Verizon's number pool for 5 years before being reassigned to Rebecca in 2010. Rebecca didn't know whose number she'd inherited. Not until 2023, 13 years after getting the number, when something happened that she couldn't explain. Mr. Holloway, I need to tell you what I found. In October 2023, I was having issues with my voicemail. Messages weren't coming through. Verizon sent a technician to reset my voicemail server. During the reset, the tech accidentally restored a set of archived voicemails that had been sitting on the carrier's server since 2005. They weren't my voicemails. They were your daughter's. Voicemail data retention varies by carrier and by era. In 2005, voicemail messages were stored on carrier-side servers rather than on the device itself. When a number was disconnected, the voicemail box was deactivated, but the server data wasn't always deleted, particularly in rural markets where server capacity wasn't a constraint. Grace's voicemails had been sitting on a Verizon legacy server for 18 years, invisible, inaccessible, preserved by the particular laziness of a system that doesn't delete what it doesn't need to keep. The technician's reset surfaced them. 12 voicemails. Dated between February 22nd and March 5th, 2005, the 2 weeks before Grace died. Rebecca listened to them. She shouldn't have, they weren't hers, but the first message began with, "Gracie, it's me," and Rebecca, a nurse who spends her career caring about people she doesn't know, couldn't stop listening. The messages were from different people, Rebecca told me. Some from friends. One from you were asking about dinner plans. But 3 of them were from a man. And the things he said were, "Mr. Holloway." They were threats. 3 voicemails. From a man whose voice Rebecca didn't recognize. Dated February 28th, March 2nd, and March 5th, the day before Grace died, Rebecca played them for me over the phone. I heard them standing in my kitchen at 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, 20 years after I buried my daughter. Message 1, February 28th, 2005. Grace, you need to stop. Whatever you think you found, you're wrong. Drop it. I'm telling you this as a friend. Drop it and walk away. Message 2, March 2nd, 2005. You didn't listen. I told you to drop it. If you take this to anyone, you'll regret it. I'm not playing. This affects people you care about. Think about your father. Message 3, March 5, 2005. Last chance, Grace. Tomorrow this gets handled, one way or another. Tomorrow. March 6th. The day Grace died. Last chance, followed by, tomorrow this gets handled, followed by a truck running a red light at 52 miles per hour into the driver's side of a 1998 Honda Civic. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the kitchen floor and I held the phone, and I listened to the silence after the third message, and I felt 20 years of accepted grief transform into something sharper, something with edges and weight and the particular density of a truth that has been waiting underground for 2 decades. Mr. Holloway, Rebecca said, I didn't know what to do with these messages. I've had them since October 2023, 16 months. I've been carrying this. I went back and forth. Should I call the police? Should I call you? Should I delete them and pretend I never heard them? But I'm a nurse. I took an oath, and I couldn't carry someone else's truth anymore. Do you still have them? I saved them. All 12. I recorded them on a separate device as backup. And I contacted Verizon's legal department to preserve the server data. I filed a formal data preservation request under the Stored Communications Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 2703, which requires carriers to preserve electronic communications when notified of potential law enforcement interest. Rebecca Voss, a nurse practitioner who'd been assigned a dead girl's phone number, had preserved the evidence using federal telecommunications law. She'd done more investigation in 16 months than the Highway Patrol had done in 20 years. I called the Pasquotank County Sheriff's Office the next morning. Not the Highway Patrol, the sheriff. Because the Highway Patrol had investigated this as a traffic accident in 2005, I wasn't reporting an accident. I was reporting a murder. The detective assigned to the case was a man named Leon Whittaker, a 22-year veteran of the sheriff's office who'd been a patrol deputy in 2005 and remembered the accident. He remembered because Elizabeth City is small and a 19-year-old college student dying on Highway 158 was the kind of event that stays in a community's memory the way a scar stays on skin. I remember Grace Holloway, Leon said. I was one of the first units on scene. State Patrol took over because it was a highway accident. We assisted with traffic control. I never had any reason to think it was anything other than what the report said. Listen to the voicemails. Leon listened. He played them 3 times on the department's audio system. He brought in his lieutenant. They listened together. Then the lieutenant called the State Bureau of Investigation, the NCSBI, North Carolina's state-level investigative agency, equivalent to the FBI at the state level, and requested assistance with a cold case review. The NCSBI assigned a special agent named Monica Reeves, a cold case specialist who'd reopened and solved 14 cases in her career. Monica's first action was to identify the voice on the 3 threatening voicemails. Voice identification in 2025 is significantly more advanced than it was in 2005. The NCSBI's forensic lab used spectrographic voice analysis, a technique that maps the unique acoustic properties of a person's voice, including fundamental frequency, formant patterns, and spectral energy distribution. The analysis compared the voicemail recordings against a database of voice samples, including recorded phone calls, court testimony recordings, and law enforcement interviews. The voice on the voicemails was identified in 11 days. The match probability was 97.3%. The voice belonged to my brother. My brother, Warren Holloway Warren, 5 years older than me, a real estate developer in Elizabeth City, the kind of small-town developer who buys vacant lots, builds duplexes, and sells them to investors from Norfolk and Virginia Beach. He'd been in business for 30 years. He had a portfolio of 22 rental properties across Pasquotank County. He was a deacon at the church. He coached Little League. He was, by every visible measure, a pillar of the community. My brother, the man who'd sat next to me at Grace's funeral. The man who'd held my shoulder while I cried. The man who'd driven me home afterward and stayed with me for 3 days because I couldn't be alone. The man who'd called me every year on Grace's birthday to check on me for 20 years. While knowing, Monica Reeves's investigation took 4 months. She started with the voicemails and worked backward. The same methodology every cold case requires. Start with what you have. Trace it to what you don't. What Grace had been investigating, the thing Warren told her to drop, was a land deal. a specific land deal that Warren had orchestrated in 2004, involving a 40-acre parcel of farmland on the outskirts of Elizabeth City. The parcel was owned by an elderly couple named Harold and Mabel Jennings. Harold was 81. Mabel was 78. They'd owned the land for 50 years, tobacco farmland that had been in the Jennings family since Reconstruction. The land was worth approximately $280,000 at market value in 2004. Warren bought it for $45,000 for $280,000 in land. The transaction was recorded at the Pasquotank County Register of Deeds on August 12, 2004. The deed showed a standard warranty deed transfer from Harold and Mabel Jennings to Warren Holloway. No coercion noted, no fraud flags. A clean transaction on paper. But the transaction wasn't clean. Grace had discovered, through her criminal justice coursework at ECSU, which included a module on white-collar crime and property fraud, that the Jennings deal was structured as an unconscionable contract. Harold Jennings had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2003. His cognitive capacity at the time of the sale was compromised. Mabel, his wife, had signed under Warren's pressure. A pressure that included the implied threat that Warren would report code violations on their farmhouse that would trigger a county condemnation proceeding. In plain language, Warren had bullied a woman whose husband had Alzheimer's into selling $280,000 in land for $45,000, using the threat of losing her home as leverage. Grace found this during a class research project. She'd been studying property records at the Pasquotank County Register of Deeds for an assignment on real estate fraud patterns. She recognized Warren's name on the Jennings deed. She pulled the transaction records. She pulled Harold Jennings's medical records through a contact at the VA hospital, where Harold was receiving treatment. She put the pieces together the way her criminal justice training had taught her. One document at a time, one connection at a time, the way investigations work. And she confronted Warren. Her uncle, the man she'd known her entire life. She told him she'd found the Jennings deal. She told him the sale was fraudulent. She told him she was going to report it. Warren's response was the 3 voicemails. Drop it. You'll regret it. Tomorrow this gets handled. Monica Reeves then investigated the connection between Warren and Dale Sutter, the truck driver who'd killed Grace. The investigation revealed what 20 years of accepted grief had hidden. Dale Sutter was not a random fisherman who ran a red light. Dale Sutter was Warren's tenant. He rented a house on Poindexter Street in Elizabeth City, one of Warren's 22 rental properties. His rent was $800 per month. He was 5 months behind, $4,000 in arrears. Warren held the threat of eviction over him like a leash. Cell tower records, obtained through a court order under the Stored Communications Act, showed that Warren and Dale Sutter exchanged 14 phone calls between March 1st and March 6, 2005. The calls increased in frequency on March 5th and 6th, 3 calls on March 5th, 2 on the morning of March 6th. The last call was at 30:47 p.m., 28 minutes before the collision, 28 minutes. Warren called Dale Sutter 28 minutes before Dale Sutter ran a red light into my daughter's car. Dale Sutter was dead. He died in 2018, liver cancer, at age 57. He couldn't be questioned. He couldn't be charged. He couldn't confirm or deny what Warren had asked him to do. But his widow could. Patricia Sutter, Dale's wife of 24 years, was interviewed by Monica Reeves in May 2025. Patricia had been carrying her own secret for 20 years. Dale wasn't the same after the accident. Patricia told Monica. He didn't sleep. He drank more than before, and he'd always been a drinker. He had nightmares. He'd wake up saying the girl over and over. I thought it was guilt. Normal guilt. The kind anyone would feel after killing someone in an accident. Did Dale ever say anything about Warren Holloway? In 2016. 2 years before Dale died. The cancer was already in him, and he knew it. He was sitting on the porch and he said, "Patty, I need to tell you something. The accident in 2005, it wasn't an accident. Warren told me to do it. He said he'd forgive the rent, all $4,000, and let me stay in the house for free for a year. He said all I had to do was run a light. He said the girl drove a Honda Civic, and she'd be on 158 at 40:15 because she had a class at the college that ended at 4. He told me which intersection. He told me which direction. He told me to make it look like I wasn't paying attention." Monica asked, "Did Dale say anything else?" He said, "I killed that girl for $4,000 in back rent and a year of free housing. and Warren Holloway went to her funeral and held her father's hand. Warren held my hand. At Grace's funeral. While knowing he'd paid the man who killed her, Warren Holloway was arrested on July 8, 2025, 20 years and 4 months after Grace's death. The charge is first-degree murder by solicitation under NCGS 1417, a class of felony. The most serious charge in North Carolina's criminal code, carrying a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without parole. Additionally, fraud, elder exploitation for the Jennings land deal, and obstruction of justice for concealing his involvement in Grace's death for 20 years. There is no statute of limitations for murder in North Carolina. NCGS 15:1 explicitly states that murder charges may be brought at any time. 50 years. 100 years. Murder does not expire, and Grace's murder, hidden for 2 decades inside a traffic accident report, was now a first-degree felony. The trial was held in October 2025. The prosecution's case was built on 3 pillars: the voicemails, the cell tower records, and Patricia Sutter's testimony. The voicemails were played for the jury. 3 messages. Drop it. You'll regret it. Tomorrow this gets handled. The jury heard my brother's voice, the same voice that had called me every year on Grace's birthday, the voice of comfort and concern, threatening his niece the day before she was killed. The cell tower records were presented by a forensic telecommunications expert who mapped the call patterns between Warren and Dale Sutter, showing escalating contact in the days before the collision and a final call 28 minutes before impact. Patricia Sutter testified about Dale's deathbed confession. The defense objected, arguing that the statement was hearsay. The judge overruled the objection under North Carolina Rule of Evidence 804, the statement against interest exception, which allows the admission of statements made by an unavailable declarant when the statement is so contrary to the declarant's interest that a reasonable person would not have made it unless it were true. Dale Sutter's confession, admitting to murder for hire, was the most self-damaging statement a person could make. The rule allowed it. Warren's defense argued that the voicemails were about business, not violence. That the cell phone calls were about rental property management. That Dale Sutter's confession was the fabrication of a dying man. The prosecutor played the third voicemail one final time. Last chance, Grace. Tomorrow this gets handled. One way or another. Tomorrow, the prosecutor said. One way or another. And the next day, Dale Sutter ran a red light at 52 miles per hour into the driver's side of Grace Holloway's car. The defendant will tell you this is a coincidence. The voicemails say otherwise. The cell records say otherwise. And Dale Sutter from his grave says otherwise. Warren was found guilty of first-degree murder by solicitation. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was also found guilty of elder financial exploitation for the Jennings land deal and ordered to pay $235,000 in restitution to the Jennings family, the difference between the $45,000 he paid and the $280,000 market value. The Jennings property was returned to Mabel Jennings, now 98 years old, still alive, living with her granddaughter in Hertford. Harold had died in 2012. Mabel cried when the restitution was announced. She said, "Harold always said that land would come back. He was right. It just took longer than we thought." After the verdict, I drove to the cemetery. Riverside Memorial. Grace's grave. The headstone I'd placed there 20 years ago, gray granite, her name, her dates, and a line I'd chosen from a poem she'd loved in high school. She walked in beauty. I sat on the ground beside the headstone and I told Grace what had happened. The voicemails. Rebecca Voss. The investigation, the trial, the verdict, her uncle, her own uncle. I told her that the thing she'd been investigating, the Jennings land deal, the fraud, the exploitation of an elderly couple, was the thing that got her killed. She'd been 19 years old, a criminal justice student, an investigator in training, and she'd uncovered a crime that a grown man had committed. And instead of facing the consequences, he'd paid a fisherman $4,000 in forgiven rent to run a red light. Grace had been killed for being exactly who she wanted to be, an investigator. At 19, in her second year of college, 11 credits from declaring her major, she'd found the truth, and the truth had killed her. And the man who ordered it had held my hand at her funeral, and called me every year on her birthday, and pretended to grieve alongside me, while knowing he was the reason for the grief. I go to the cemetery every Sunday. I sit. I don't cry anymore, not because the grief has faded, but because the grief has been joined by something else, justice. Not the kind that heals, the kind that holds, the kind that says, what happened to you was not an accident. Someone did this. And someone answered for it. Rebecca Voss and I have coffee once a month. She kept Grace's phone number. She told the carrier she wanted to keep it. I asked her why. Because it called you, she said. That number sat in a server for 18 years, waiting. And when it surfaced, it called the right person. I don't want it going back into the pool. I want it to stay connected to something that matters. Grace's number is still active. I still call it on September 14th. But now, instead of the automated message, I get Rebecca's voicemail. And I leave a message. Every year, happy birthday, Grace. Someone's still listening. I'm Arthur Holloway. I'm 64 years old. My daughter was buried 20 years ago. Last month, someone called me from her number. What they told me reopened a case that should never have been closed and exposed a truth that my own brother had buried deeper than my daughter. If this story touched you, leave a comment. Tell me, would you have answered that call at 9:14 p.m.? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about family truth and the calls we almost miss. Before we close, this story, like all stories on this channel, contains fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, that's completely okay. Take care of yourselves. But if you stayed until the end, thank you. Grace would have liked you. She wanted to be an investigator. And you just stayed for the entire case.